In 1986, this man went on a killing spree. In a 24-hour period, he took the lives of 5 women and children, but he didn't stop there. Tonight, DK and I will examine how Daniel Lee Siebert went from a tortured childhood to drugs and underage prostitution and eventually serial killer. How many more victims were there? Let's find out this week in the Shadowlands. Welcome to the Shadowlands. I'm your co-host, Jim.
And I am your co-host, DK.
DK, we're taking a nice little trip back in time today to the mid-1980s. Do you remember the mid-1980s?
I do. I was privy to them as a very, very young child. Yes.
You can't be, you couldn't have been very, very young because you're not much younger than I am. And I was high school years in the mid-80s, so don't be trying to portray that. Yeah, okay, buddy. All right.
You are fooling yourself. Yeah. No, I was, depends on what year. I was 5 years old in 1980, and that's all I'll say. So.
Okay, I'll give you that. That's fair. Yeah. So I was in high school, but we're going to Talladega, Alabama. What do you think life in the 1980s was like in Talladega, Alabama?
A lot of beer and a lot of racing. That's where my mind goes. Talladega, Alabama. Big race town.
Yeah, I was up in Jersey, so it was a lot of parachute pants and big hair.
It's probably still a lot of beer and a lot of racing. All due respect to Talladega, Alabama. Yeah.
There's in Talladega, Alabama, in the late or mid 1980s, I should say, so in 1986, there's this individual named Daniel Lee Siebert, and he actually ends up going on this killing spree that takes 24 hours, like just wipes out an entire family and then more people in a 24-hour period. Now, he does more, but we're going to focus on these 5 individuals that he takes out. Sound like a plan?
It's a plan, man. Let's go.
All right. So we're going to start, like every good story does, from the beginning. And we're going to go to Mattoon, Illinois. No, I've never been to Mattoon, Illinois. I have no idea what type of town it is, but
listen, I was born in Chicago, and I'm just going to tell you everything outside of Chicago in Illinois is going to be pretty much farmland and small town rural America. Okay,
like cornfields and soy fields and things of that nature.
Lots of cornfields for sure. Yeah.
So June 17th, 1954, he's born in Mattoon, Illinois, and he's born to Edwin and Dorothy Siebert. And his childhood was really, really messed up. I guess most serial killers, a lot of them have this screwed up childhood, and his is no different. It was very abusive, like growing up mentally, physically. A word I can't say on YouTube that kind of sounds like 6, but isn't. It was all his father. His father was the demon. And Daniel, at a young age, was, he's trying to avoid his old man. And what he would do was he would kind of hide in his room and he would draw and create all this different artwork that he had.
Probably just to get away, right? Probably just to escape. That's what a lot of kids do who don't grow up to be serial killers, but at the same time, especially those that do, more than likely need some level of escape from reality, right? So that's probably what his was.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got to get away from the madness that's going on around him somehow. So why not go into art? I mean, when I was a kid, I used to sit there and draw different fantasy lands and stuff and, try to picture yourself in there. Now, truth be told, I can't even draw stick figures. So it was my fantasy land. There was no fantasy to be had there. Let me tell you, it was pretty bad. But I mean, you've seen some of this guy's artwork. I know you have in the past.
I have. Yeah.
And what this stuff actually morphs into in this twisted, depraved mind that he has. I obviously can't show all of the artwork here, but at the end of this video, for those who stick around, I'll put up some of his artwork that I can show on here, and then I'll give you guys a link in the description where you can go and you can see the rest of his catalog or collection or whatever you want to call it. but you view
First
that
of
at
all,
your own risk.
You said for those that stick around, everybody watching needs to stick around. This is definitely gonna be a story you want to miss any of the details on. There's a lot going on in this one, I'm quite sure, and the artwork is something to be had. So make sure you guys stay in to the very end.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because the reasons, I mean, we know he's a serial killer, obviously, we've given that away. But what he does with the bodies, and then at the end, when I reveal why he actually did that, I mean, you really, really, really see what a true life monster can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
sick. Yep. So, all right, well, let's get back to this guy. So he's dad's beating the hell out of him, you know, physically, mentally, everything else. And he has a sister too, an older sister. I have to assume she's taking some of this abuse as well, although I don't know for sure. Not much information on her. Actually, not much on any of his family members. I did see that, you know, she did take some of the abuse at some points. He's going on with life. He's doing his thing, just trying to get by and avoid his old man. About the time he hits 13 years old, or actually, I'm sorry, he's 13 and he's getting close to hitting 14. He's like a few months from hitting 14. Like, I guess tension had been brewing around the house with his old man. And his old man comes home in like a fit of rage from work, and he's just looking for Daniel. His father finds him, and they tee off on each other. And well, I guess at this point, his dad tees off on Daniel, but his mom steps in, and she's trying to stop father from beating the hell out of the kid. The father gets pissed off at the mother, and he starts turning all of his attention on her now, and he starts beating on her. And at that moment, something snapped in Daniel. I don't know if it was he was just tired of being abused or just that instinct to protect your mother, but he attacked his dad and they started going at it big time. I don't know who won the fight or what the outcome of that fight was, but I can tell you it was enough to make the mother or his mother file for divorce finally. So she files for divorce. Now she's off, just her and Daniel. I guess the sister at this point was already 18 and had split.
Probably out of there. Yeah, probably out of there.
Yeah, I mean, who the hell wouldn't want to get the hell out of there as soon as they could? So at this point, Daniel and his mother have their own place, and Daniel's thinking, you know, he's 14, and he's like, God, I finally get a little sense of normalcy. I can maybe be a normal kid, you know? This is, at this time, he was born in 1954. He's 14. This is 1968. Things are different in 1968, and women at that time hadn't really entered the normal workforce. Right. So it was still kind of stay-at-home moms and do things of that nature. She needed money. There was no way she was going to be able to support herself plus Daniel. I don't know if there was an alimony situation or child support there with his old man or not, but she started dating like instantly. All this dating was driving Daniel nuts. And I'm not saying his mom was like a tramp or anything like that. I'm just saying she was just looking for somebody to provide for the family, I'm sure.
Yeah. Say it's kind of a fight or flight situation. You find yourself in a situation where you've slayed the dragon, or you've you know, you're David and you've taken out Goliath and you're free now, but all of a sudden free is scary because you have to maintain and take care of yourself, take care of your kids even. So you have to do what you have to do. So I'm sure he wasn't loving all the in and out of the house of the other guys.
No, and at 14 years old, I highly doubt he understood that. I mean, every kid thinks they know everything at age 14, 15, 16. That's when they have all the answers.
Didn't you?
Of course I did.
I knew better then than I do now.
So she finally does meet somebody. She does all this dating and she finds this guy, something, I don't know his first name, but his last name was Marlowe. And she ends up getting married in less than 12 months from her divorce. So less than a year from the day she was free, she remarries. And then within a couple of months after that, she gets pregnant. Daniel at this point is just like, I'm done with this. And he is, I guess you could say this is when he turns down his really dark path. He at this point starts stealing from, you know, neighbors and stuff like that, petty thefts, assaults and things of that nature. He's doing drugs a little bit. He's skipping school, so he's got the truancy officers looking for him.
He sounds like a teenager, you know?
Yeah, and at 14, 15, he's what, maybe a freshman high school around this time?
Yep.
Freshman, sophomore, maybe?
Sophomore, somewhere like that, yep.
So he's doing all this bad shit, and he starts stealing from family members, and he gets caught. And now he's got to go away. So they send him into this boys' home for juveniles. And he gets in there, and I don't know how long he was in there, but he doesn't really care for it too much. So he escapes, you know? It's a surprise. So Daniel learns a pretty valuable lesson when he escapes, and that life isn't free, and he had nowhere to run to. You know what I mean? You can't go home, and the cops are going to look there first thing once you escape from the boys' home. So he takes off. He's on his own. He's really young, and he needs money. He turns to prostitution, actually becomes a male prostitute, and gets involved in drugs pretty heavily. He was doing, back then, it was PCP. Are you familiar with that?
I first heard about it growing up as a adolescent in mid-state Florida, and then out in Texas, growing up as a teenager, and even some in California. I kind of traveled out as a kid. We moved around quite a bit, but PCP was relevant at the time. I think it's not something that I think every kid could go ahead and grab, but it would show up. It was pretty heavy, and I think it's like a hallucinogen, if I'm not mistaken. Like I said, I've never had it, but I've heard it can take you to different places. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually read about it a little bit when I was doing the research on the story, because I wanted to see what it did, and it was a very powerful hallucinogen. However, there were certain circumstances where it would have a different effect on the individual, and their reaction would be somewhat of like rage. They would just go into like this berserker mode and shit and start fighting and just be full of all this rage, I guess. So I'm thinking, I don't know which side hit him. Probably the side that wasn't like that, because he wasn't really killing anybody when he was out at this time. He was just being a prostitute and doing drugs. You know what I mean?
Just trying to get by. Right?
Exactly. Killing people's gonna, tends to draw attention. So, and he's trying to stay low key at this point. So, but it doesn't matter. It didn't really last. He gets busted again, and they arrest his ass. At this time, they throw him not in a jail, but not in a boys' home either. It's like a youth home, a youth institute, but it's a step down from prison, if that makes sense. So he spends a little bit of time inside the youth home or youth institute. He gets out when he's 18, and he decides, I really want to clean up my life. I want to make a new start. And I think the best way for me to do this and get some structure in my life is to join the Marines. So he goes from criminal to thinking he can join the Marines. That's a big step, in my opinion. I don't know about you.
Have you met a Marine?
I did. Well, I lived with one. I actually, yeah, they're nuts.
I've never met anybody who's come out of that thing the same way. We'll just say that they come out a different person, very, very often for the better, right? Strong and disciplined and everything else. But for someone who doesn't like authority and whatnot,
I give all the credit in the world to our service members, and thank you for everything you do, but absolutely, that is just not a life for me, man. I could not have somebody screaming in my face like that. No. It would not work. I'd probably end up laughing. I'd be the guy doing push-ups. I'd probably look like Popeye today if I joined the Marines, because I'd be doing push-ups the entire time I was in there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I think in the movie it was the Army, but I think of Stripes every time I visualize something like this, and I'm definitely the Bill. I'm not probably more the. I'm not. No, what was his name? Not Bill Murray, but and not Rick Moranis. So what was the other guy's name who played Egon in the Ghostbusters? He was in that movie too, and he was the guy always laughing and couldn't hold a straight face and whatnot. And that would be me for sure. So he decides to become a Marine.
He decides to try. I mean, he didn't last very long. He actually ended up getting booted out pretty quickly by going AWOL. So now he's out of the Marines, and he decides he's going to go west. So he starts hitchhiking his way to Los Angeles. And what he's doing for money along the way is he has art skills. So as he would go from town to town, he would approach the local businesses along the way, and he would offer to paint signs for them for, I guess, the specials or whatever they needed painted. And he'd get some money from that and either hitchhike or buy a bus ticket or a train ticket and get him to where he had to go. So he was at least smart enough to use some of the skills that he had to his advantage. You know what I mean?
So he hitchhiked all the way to California?
Yeah, I don't know where he was in boot camp or where he was last stationed as a Marine, so I don't know how far it was, but...
So he went AWOL, but then he's like, you know what? Forget the Marines. I'm going to California. Jim, have you ever hitchhiked before? Have you ever done that?
No, absolutely
Side
not.
of the road, thumb out, stick stick with the bag of your stuff, whatever. That's the visual I get from it. You either get there or you get dead most of the time. So I've never had the courage to do it. I've never been in a situation where I've had to hitchhike. Sounds kind of fun and liberating, right? Let's see where my thumb gets me, right? But that doesn't always work out great. So, but it did for him. So he got to California.
Yeah, and keep in mind, though, this is a different time period. I mean, your figure, he's 18. He was born in 1954. So this is the early 70s.
Yeah.
Right. It's still peace and love and flower power and everything else around this time. So hitchhiking was a little more commonplace back then than it is today.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean the danger was different back then. It just was.
We just weren't wise to it, right? Yeah, and we probably weren't wise to it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Either case, I was a young kid at that point, so if I was hitchhiking, there was bigger problems than that. But,
yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right.
So he hitchhikes his way all the way to Los Angeles. He gets there. He meets a woman, and he falls in love, and he has a couple of kids. But that doesn't work out. So he finds out that being a parent isn't easy, nor is it all it's cracked up to be, I guess, for him in his case. And so he started turning to drugs again, which led to petty theft and assault charges and things of that nature. So before long, it was time for him to get the hell out of Los Angeles. Sure. Now, let me just back up a half a step. And he has his son. Now, remember, he had a son and a daughter. The daughter, much like his sister when he was younger, there's not much information. Actually, there's no information on her that I can find. The son, a little bit of a different story. So his son's name was Daniel Siebert, which isn't Damien like devil or something like that? Isn't it always somehow associated with that? Like
that's what they used in the Omen. Yeah, that was like the kid that.
All right, so that's where I saw it.
That's the Omen. Yeah.
Okay, so he names his kid Damien. No offense to those named Damien, but I'm just saying it's
apropos, right?
But there was an association to be had there. Yeah. So anyway, his kid was at the time when I was doing the research, was in jail in a California prison because he had done some things to a minor over the age of 14 that it's pretty well frowned upon in, United Most States places. Everywhere. Yeah. So he was locked up for that. Now, I don't know if he's free now, and if he did, hopefully he was rehabilitated and is no longer able to do that shit, but it doesn't seem like the apple fell far from the tree in this case. So Daniel decides he's getting the hell out of Los Angeles, and he goes to the one place where he knows he can get his life in order. One place where there would be no distractions. One place where he could find himself and finally straighten himself out. And they call that place
Provo, Utah.
So like an idiot, he goes to Vegas.
So it's not Provo, Utah. Okay, so it's not Provo, Utah. Okay, all right. Because you just described Utah. Okay, yeah, I'm leaning into sarcasm here. Okay, very good.
I'm with you. So, but back, what the hell is a Provo, Utah?
It's just beautiful, serene, just everything you described. But you really, I know where you were going, but I was just being comical. Somewhere that's peaceful and no distractions, and you can connect with, the creator or the universe, whatever wherever you are in that. Vegas is the exact opposite of the universe of that place. So yeah, I was just grabbing a place you just described, but yeah. So Las Vegas,
Sin City, is that not its nickname?
It is. What happens there stays there.
Well, he's about to sin. So he gets there. I don't know how long he's there. It's not very long, but he actually finds another companion. So he gets involved into a relationship, but with this time he gets involved with a man. So he actually swings from both sides of the plate here.
Okay.
Apparently.
All right.
Well, he was a male prostitute.
Well, I was gonna say he's just dipping into probably some familiarity, right? Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with someone preferring both genders, but in his experience, he's drawing from a dark place, right?
He is. I don't know if what happened as a child influenced that or kind of developed that or whatever the case, or maybe it's just the way he was.
Maybe he's just born that way. That's fine. Yeah, but
yeah, which is cool. Do what you got to do, man. It's his prerogative. No issues with that. But what I do have an issue with is that, like, we've all been in relationships in one way or another, and not everything's always going to come up, roses and butterflies. Sometimes there's some speed bumps along the way, and when there are, you probably shouldn't stab your partner 29 times. And that's actually pretty much what he ended up doing. I mean,
that's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing, but wow, 29 times. That, typically anything more than once or twice, they say typically comes from a perspective of passion or jealousy or intimacy, outright evil, right? But 29 times, you're going after something.
Right. He's pissed about something. Now, if you kill somebody, mind you've just literally stabbed them 29 times. You're thinking that's life in prison. It's got to be, right?
Oh yeah, or worse. Yeah.
You would think. But somehow he convinces a judge and jury that this was self-defense. Now, does that mean like he was holding the knife and his partner fell on the knife 29 times in a row? I don't know like how you say that was self-defense, but and I guess they did say, no, in his defense, when I was doing the research, they did say he was a charming sumbitch, but I don't. How charming can you be to convince the jury that you stabbed somebody 29 times in self-defense? So
what was I supposed to do? By number 18, he was still breathing. So yeah, obviously pretty charming because he pulled it off. Wow.
Yeah, I guess the rules are a little laxed in Vegas because they only gave him 10 years in prison for that. It was dropped down to like a manslaughter charge, and I think they kind of wanted it to go away. So all right, they locked his ass up for 10 years.
Yeah, so he gets sentenced in 1974 for 10 years. He serves 10 years and it's 1984 before he's out, right? Is that like the timeline?
No, you're close though. 1979 is when he actually made
79,
it to right, because remember he got out of the military in like early 70s, and then he jumped and went into Los Angeles, and he was there for about 5 or 6 years before he took off to Vegas.
Right. There you go. Okay, yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, okay.
Right,
5 years lost there. Okay, so 79 to 89 then. Okay.
Right. So 79 is when he's in Vegas. All of this shit happens. And he's actually goes into jail, of course. He's got to serve his 10 years. But he's like the model prisoner. He's doing great. So they decide we'll allow you out on work release program. And I don't think it was one of those where you get out so you can work during the day and then you come home and go back to jail in the evening. I'm picturing more of like a chain gang type thing. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But either way, we know how much Daniel loved authority and loved when people told him what to do. So, and the opportunist that he was, he somehow figured out an escape plan from this work detail. And in 1981, he ends up only a few years into his sentence. He escapes. And somehow...
I knew this was coming again.
Yeah, I mean, this little prick, he should have written a book on how to escape from prison, made millions of dollars, and he wouldn't have to do all this shit. He escapes prison, and he leaves Vegas, and he hijacks this car. Somehow he got his hands on a gun. He hijacks this car, but keeps the woman, so it's kidnapping as well, who was driving the car, and she's in the car with him, and he heads for California. So he's cruising, and he's going over the Golden Gate Bridge. And I have to assume the speed limit's probably 50, 55 miles per hour. I've never personally been on the bridge before.
Yeah.
And while he's going over the bridge, she freaks out, and she actually escapes by jumping out of the moving car while it's doing like 55, dude.
Okay. I've been on this bridge. Okay. Let me just tell you, you're not going slow. It's a 55, at least 55 miles an hour, if not more, right? Right now it's a toll road. I don't know if it was back in the 80s or even the 70s or 80s, but I will say this. Unless it's 2 o'clock in the morning, there's always a lot of traffic on that road. So you have to be mad desperate to, number one, throw yourself out of a moving vehicle at any point in time. Doing that kind of speed, let alone on one of the biggest bridges in the world, as well as one of the busiest ones at the same time. Maybe she's just like, I'd rather die this way than whatever this guy's going to do to me. Or maybe she thought she could survive it and then get help, But wow, that's crazy.
I'm guessing she convinced herself that she was thinking that she can get help because, I don't know. I don't know if I could do it, dude. But it's one of those...
Yeah, no, I couldn't do it.
Good for her, though.
Good for her. Do we know, did she get away? Did she live? Did she die? Like, what happened?
I'm guessing she got away and lived. It was probably a little scraped up, but I didn't read anything that he had to face any charges for her death. So she jumps out of the car. He keeps it. He keeps going. And the very next day, he gets busted in Oakland. I don't know where Oakland is in relation to the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, how far is that?
No, like 45 minutes. Yeah.
So he gets caught in Oakland. They arrest his ass, and they bring him back to Vegas, and they throw him back in prison. So at this point, they bring him in front of whatever the board or judge, and they're like, hey, you hijacked the car, you got a gun, you escaped from the work release, you did all this bad shit. We're going to have to add some time to your sentence here. How much time do you think they added to his sentence for that little escapade?
Well, they doubled it. They had to, right? I mean, if let's say he was serving 10 years, they give him another 10?
One would hope. But that's not the case. They tack on one more year to his 10-year sentence. Now he has to serve 11 years. Just one. That's one.
Jesus.
Well, sort of. Let me explain the one, because there's a caveat to that. So he gets into prison. Obviously, he's not getting work release, so he's not finding a way to escape. He's got to serve his 11 years now. But by year 6, so he's 6 years into his sentence, he appears in front of the parole board, and he's paroled. So essentially, he served 6 years for stabbing his lover 29 times, and now he's out on parole. However, this is where the caveat comes in. The judge says, we'll let you out, but you need to promise that you're going to come back and face charges for the kidnapping and the assault and the stealing of the car and the crossing the state lines. And he said, you bet, Your Honor. I promise I'll come back and go to court for that. And Your Honor said, excellent. We'll see you when the date is. And This sumbitch beat feet out of there, and he ran straight to Arizona.
Okay.
Which,
listen, I've never had the urge, the desire, the propensity to become a criminal. But I'm just telling you that if I was ever going to do that in any capacity, I missed my window, because that time frame was the time to do it, because apparently the justice system was taking Valiums with their morning vitamins.
I almost think, like, even if you go back to the 1940s, how friggin' stupid did you have to be to get busted for a crime back then? There was no fingerprint technology, no computer databases, no anything. Nothing. I mean, today there's people's friggin' doorbell cameras are getting people screwed. You can't even leave your house without the police being able to, like, put a video of your entire journey to where you were going. Unbelievable. So once again, he somehow charmed the shit out of that judge, and he gets out after 6 years. He's obviously not sticking around. So he starts working his way towards Arizona. But by this time, he knew better. He wasn't going to go in and say, I'm Daniel Siebert. He had to change his name. So he changed his name to Daniel Spence. He gets to Arizona and he decides, I'm going to head east. So he's hitchhiking, and he meets this individual by the name of Donald Hendren. Donald picks him up along the way, and Donald's a really super nice guy. He works at the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and the Blind, which is kind of a campus-like college, or not college, but educational center for individuals that are deaf and blind. Right. So the students there, you're going to find, are all different ages. You'll have people that are going to school there that are in their 20s and 30s, and students that are, very young, and teachers of all ages as well. So they're talking along the way. They're headed basically, I guess, dead east from Arizona at this point. And Arizona to Alabama, I don't know how long of a ride that is. What do you think, 8 to 10 hours? Maybe more?
From Arizona to Alabama?
Yeah, like how long of a ride is that?
Bro, listen, to get across Texas is a full day. That's 12 to 18, depending on how fast you're going. And this time, probably speed limit 55 back then. They're probably speeding doing 65, maybe 70 if you're really risking it back then. Yeah, you're talking a full morning, sunrise to sundown, deep into the night before you can cross Texas. So you're talking probably 18 hours at least to get from there to there, maybe even 20. Yeah.
18 hours in a car with somebody you don't know? No way, man. I'm not that lonely,
No.
But anyway, Daniel is a charming sumbitch. So the whole time, I guess they're jawing back and forth. Donald likes this guy so much that he actually says, hey, if you ever make your way to Alabama and the Talladega area, I can get you a position as a volunteer at the school, working maybe in the art department. And Daniel's like, oh, that's a great idea. Thanks. I appreciate that. And so they continue on the journey, and they get to Jackson, Mississippi. And that's actually, I know that's not far from Talladega, Alabama, but that's where Daniel decides to get out. He's actually contemplating maybe going home to visit his family. I guess his mom and her new husband and maybe the baby. Although I don't think the kid would be a baby at this point. It'd probably be, maybe toddler? 9-10 years old at this point.
Oh, no, yeah. You're talking jump ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Adolescent. Yeah.
Yeah. So his stepbrother, I guess, not half brother it would be, because same mother, they'd share the same mother. Right. But regardless, it doesn't matter. He decided not to do that. He said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go take him up on this job offer. So he heads to Talladega. He gets into town 11 days after Donald Hendren had dropped him off in Jackson. He then arrived in Talladega, gets him on the phone. He says, hey, guess what? I'm here. Donald says, great, come down to the school. I'll introduce you around. So Daniel gets to the school. He meets Donald there. Donald shows him around. The two had hit it off so well that they decided they were going to get an apartment together. However, they needed a little bit of time to find one. So the school was more campus-like, and they had rooming or housing for the students, or some students, and faculty. So Donald and Daniel actually stayed at the school for about 2 weeks.
Sounds like a bit of a compound, right? Was it like a compound?
Yeah, it was a lot of what I saw and a lot of the interviews that I saw on this. Everybody said it was a very tight knit community.
Yeah.
And they certainly made it sound like a compound. The images that I saw of the school itself didn't really resemble like dormitories or anything like this. You just see like one building here, one building there. But it certainly, if it wasn't a compound, it definitely was a tight community within the between the teachers and the students itself. Daniel actually was commissioned by the school to do a big mural for the school. And while he was doing this mural, he met this one girl that was actually a student there. Her name was Sherri Weathers. And Sherri, I think she was in her early 20s, 23, 24 years old at this time. And she was enamored with Daniel, and he was also taken aback by her. So they start kind of dating, very early on. And the 2 weeks is up. Daniel and Donald get their apartment. They move off of campus, and Daniel is continuing to date Sherri. Now, there's a problem with that because the school has a very, very, very strict policy that faculty is not allowed to date the students.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? And even though he's a volunteer, Daniel's not even a paid employee, so I don't even know where he was getting money to pay for his friggin' rent, but he's still faculty, so that's a no-no. And it actually started to cause a rift between Daniel and Donald.
Right, because his name is all over him, right? He's like, yo, man, like, I vouched for you. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while all this is going on, they're still friendly, but they're just not seeing eye to eye. So Donald says, listen, I think at this point, it's best if I just move out. You do what you got to do. I'm going to do my thing, but I don't really want to live here and be part of what you've got going on in this situation. Now, this is where we're getting to very specific dates because this is where the timeline actually starts, where all the crazy shit starts happening. It's February 19th, 1986. Donald's packing up the rest of his shit at the apartment, gets it all loaded up into his car, and he talks to Daniel and tells him, listen, I'll be by tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
So they're still friendly. He just, you know what I mean? He just doesn't want to live in. He takes off. He goes, Donald leaves. And Daniel, it was supposed to that day have lunch with his buddy Steve Laney, who has an apartment with his girlfriend Linda Odom in the same complex that Daniel lives. So he goes over there and he has lunch with Steve and Linda. And Steve actually had to leave that lunch early because his car was getting worked on, or his truck, and he had to go pick it up. So Daniel stuck around with Linda, finished lunch, talking a little bit. And then he left there and he had to go over to Sherri's house, his girlfriend's. Now, Sherri lived in a different apartment complex called the Sunrise Apartments. And the Sunrise Apartments were kind of an apartment complex that were associated with the school, and they were assisted living. So if you had a problem like you were deaf or maybe blind or just needed assistance.
Yeah, the apartments are probably, number one, have staff. They have like lights inside that when the phone rings, the doorbell rings, there's like a light that flashes if you're deaf. Or I've seen communities like this. It's actually pretty cool because they can go about living in their own independent life, but they still have support, people that come in and check on them and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was nice from what I could see, or what I could read about the apartment complex. But it was probably about, I think, 10 to 15 minutes away from where Daniel lived. So he somehow got from his apartment after lunch and made his way over to Sherri's house, or apartment, I should say. She's there with her friend Linda Jarman, who is a neighbor of theirs, and both Sherri and Linda are single mothers, and their kids play together all the time. Three of them jump in Linda Jarman's car, and they go up to the convenience store just to buy some beer for the card game and some snacks and things of that nature. And they come back to the game, and they're playing. And as time goes on, they drink up the beer, so they decide they want to get more. And Daniel says, I'll go, but he takes Linda Jarman's car because he doesn't have transportation of his own.
Okay. All right.
So he takes off. Now, around 10:30 that night, another neighbor comes over, just another friend of theirs, and he was supposed to join them for the card game. He said that he hung around till about 12:30, and Daniel still hadn't returned from buying beer. And Daniel had left before he even got there. So this guy was like, screw it, at 12:30, I'm not waiting around, I'm going home, I'm tired. So he takes off and he goes back home. Daniel comes back shortly thereafter. Linda at this point she was tired. It had to be probably 1:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So she just takes her car and she goes back to her apartment, which is, she lives in the same complex, but she's a couple buildings down. Sherri Ann Weathers and Daniel get in this huge argument that night. Now, there's no details on what the argument was about. I'm sure it had something to do with the fact that the guy took the friggin' car to go get beer and was gone for like 3 or 4 hours.
Where do you go? Yeah. Yeah, there's no cell phones. You just gotta wait. Wait and worry. Like, did he get in a car accident? Did he fall asleep? What's going on? Wow, that's not suspicious.
So they get in this big fight, and he says, screw this, and he leaves. So he has no transportation. It's early in the morning, you know what I mean? So he's nowhere to go. So he goes and he bangs on Linda Jarman's door. He says, hey, just had a big ass fight with Sherri. Do you mind if I sleep on the couch tonight? So I can get the hell out of here in the morning. And she's like, no, come on in. So he lets her, or she lets him in, and he crashes on the couch. So a few days go by, and Sherri hasn't been at school. Her friends at school and the teachers, faculty, students,
yep,
they're getting concerned because, you know what I mean? Sherri's not one to miss class. A few of her friends get together and they go talk to one of the superintendents at the school, I guess one of the counselors or something, and they decide they're going to go over to the Sunrise Apartments and do a welfare check on her. And they get management to help them get in, and they open the door and immediately get smashed in the face with this just horrible odor, like something just rotting.
Yeah, rancid, yeah.
Just
that's
rank.
Bad.
So
that's bad.
So they immediately shut the door. They don't even go in to see what the hell it is. And they call the cops.
This is Sherri's house, right? With the Sherri.
Yeah, this is Sherri's with the 2 kids. So exactly. So the cops get there and they walk in and they find Sherri laying dead in the hallway. And she has her 2 sons also dead, laying on top of her. And the police are just absolutely disgusted. You know what I mean? They're floored by what they're seeing. They couldn't believe it. So they're looking for clues. They're doing their cop things. While they're probably about 2 to 3 hours into the investigation, they get another phone call. And it's from the school again. And it's the school saying, hey, another one of our teachers is also missing. She hasn't been in class at all in a few days.
Linda Oman.
Go
Linda
ahead.
Odom. Linda Odom.
No, Linda Jarman.
Linda Jarman, yeah.
Yeah, Linda Jarman. So the neighbor, Linda Jarman, hasn't shown up either.
That's the one who owned the car. That's the one whose car he used.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That they were playing cards with that night.
Yeah.
So the cops say, okay, she's, a couple buildings over. We'll go do a welfare check there. So they go knock on her door. Nobody answers. Management lets them in, and same thing. It's horrible odor, and they find Linda laying dead in her bedroom. They get another call from the school. They're telling them that one of the faculty members, a volunteer, has also not been seen in a few days, and that was Daniel Spence. All because at this point he was still using the Spence last name. Remember, he had changed his name when he not legally, but started using that alias when he went to Arizona and met Hendren for the first time. A couple days go by. They had managed to pull some fingerprints out of the apartments and from the crime scenes. They run it through their database, and the database comes back with Daniel Siebert, not a Daniel Spence. And at this point, they realize, wait a second, Daniel Siebert, this guy is wanted. He's got a bench warrant out because he didn't appear for court for that hijacking of that woman and her car when he escaped from prison when he was in the Las Vegas.
The one he promised he would attend. Yeah, he promised.
He swore he was going to be there. I don't know why he didn't make it, but they finally figure out that he is Daniel Spence. Daniel Spence is Daniel Siebert. So they put out this all points bulletin for Daniel, Linda's car, and they go and they find out where Daniel used to live, and they go and they do a search on his apartment. Now, when they search his apartment, they didn't really find anything of substance, although they did find a map. And this map had these X's and O's on it. Like, there was sometimes they'd find an X, sometimes they'd find like an X with a circle around it. but didn't really have anything else on it. Like, that didn't tell them anything. So they just held it on the map, but they didn't find anything else. So while they're digging around in his apartment and spending a few days talking to everybody, trying to get more details, he's actually up in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. So you figure Alabama to Kentucky, he's probably, 8 hours away? Somewhere around that? So about 400 miles, 500 miles?
Right around, yeah, right around that, yeah.
So he's up in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, but the car gets flat. So police are driving around. They see the flat tire on the car, notice it's been there for a couple of days. They run the tags, and lo and behold, it comes up stolen out of Talladega, Alabama. So they call Alabama to Talladega, and they say, hey, listen, we found the car that you're looking for. It's up here. So the detectives from Alabama jump in their car, and they race up to Kentucky immediately. And they get there, and as they're looking through the car, they're pulling prints off for evidence. And of course, they find prints showing that it's Daniel Siebert. But they also find a lot of weird shit, like IDs and some personal items that belong to both Sherri, her kids, and Linda Jarman. So along with pictures of the family members, like, remember, he's an artist, so he's drawing pictures of like Linda and her kids, and Sherri and her kids, and it's like just trophies, real creepy, man. Shit. Yeah. So they find that, and they also find a campsite, like this little makeshift campsite nearby, that also has shit that also ties him back to Linda and Sherri. And so the police at this point are convinced, this is their guy. So one other item that they did find at the time, they didn't think was a huge deal, but actually turns out to be big. So a little foreshadowing for you. They found his address book. And what they did with this was they actually assigned one of the detectives back in Talladega, said, start going through this address book and contacting the people in it and see if we can find some clues or where he might be hiding, or maybe he contacts somebody and they let us know where he's at. Now, meanwhile, Daniel knows his jig is up in Kentucky, so he takes off and he runs to Atlantic City, New Jersey. Now, when he gets to Atlantic City, he's flat broke. He has no transportation and he needs money. So he's combing the hotels down in AC, and he sees this woman named Beatrice McDougal. Now, Beatrice is a part-time, she's like in her mid-50s, and she's a part-time tour guide in AC. And basically what she was doing was setting up kind of like a banquet room for her group, because her group was off gambling and doing a little bit of sightseeing on their own. And when they returned, they were going to meet back up in this room, and she would continue on with the tour. So he sees Beatrice in the room setting up for her group to come back for when they're done sightseeing and gambling and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Walks in the room, closes the door, he stabs her 3 times in the stomach, strangles her, and steals her money. Now, he takes off from there, but he's still in New Jersey. He just leaves the hotel where she was at. I think it was Caesar's Hotel and Casino is where that happened. And he's on the lam in Jersey. The police don't know who committed that murder. They're still looking for the murderer, and he is running out of money because Beatrice didn't have a lot of money on her. So he starts assaulting more people while he's in Jersey, and he gets caught. And when he gets caught, he actually hands over the ID that he had stolen from one of Sherri's sons. I don't know which one it was. I forget which one. I think, either Chad or Joey Weathers, but they're like 4 and 5 years old. And he hands over the Social Security card for the son, and he hands that to the police. So now the police think, it's just an assault charge on this either Chad or Joey Weathers. And he ends up serving 61 days in jail for that assault.
Wow.
He gets that's it, 61 days. But they don't know, I guess.
If you're him, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, at any moment in time in these 61 days I'm sitting here, they're going to piece all this other stuff together and they're going to find me.
You would think, but I don't know if they fingerprinted him. I'm assuming they did, but I don't know if they ran it through the database. But that's got to take time back then. And if they did, it didn't bring back a hit showing that he wasn't Chad Weathers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he serves his 61 days. He gets out, and of course, he's got no money. So he does his little spree again where he's assaulting people and he steals a car and he heads south. But this time, he doesn't make it far. He gets as far as about Virginia and he gets pulled over. Car comes back stolen. The cop happens to look in the car and they find like this twine and all sorts of like tape and shovels and shit that it just looked really suspicious.
He left. He's like, you might as well have had like a neon sign pointing and saying, look what I have here. You know? God.
Serial killer. Right, idiot. Well, he goes in. He gives them this time the ID of Joey Weathers, the other one, the other son. So he gives him that social security card, but he bonds out. So I guess car theft isn't like an offense where you've got to sit. You bond out, you bond out. I don't know how much money he had on him either, but maybe the bond wasn't that expensive, but he got out. So he leaves Virginia and he heads to Nashville, Tennessee. So around this time, Talladega detectives get a phone call that some bones are found in a shallow grave next to or in a cemetery that is located next to Talladega County. Okay. They go out there. After some analysis, they find that these bones belong to Linda Odom, the same individual that was at lunch with Daniel on February 19th, the same night that he got in that fight with Sherri and Linda and killed them. He'd gone to lunch and had lunch with his neighbors, Steve and Linda Odom, and then apparently he's now killed her. At least that's what they're thinking. So now there's another murder that they're looking to tie to him. He's headed to Nashville, and they finally get a break in the case. So remember I said that address book they found was foreshadowing?
Yeah.
Well, one of the detectives had reached a girlfriend of Daniel's that lived in Vegas, and that ex-girlfriend contacted the Talladega Police Department and said, Daniel just called me. He wouldn't tell me where he was, but he did tell me what time it was, and I could tell that there was a bad storm going on in his area. She could hear the thunder going off.
Right.
And so the police immediately contact the National Weather Service and they say, in this time zone, where are there any major storms happening? And it turns out there was only one area in that time zone that had a major storm happening. And that's where they figured out he was in, Nashville or near Nashville, Tennessee. Wow. So they traced the call of where he had called from, and they trace it to like this little store/restaurant that's in a little surrounding town outside of Nashville. So the cops jump in the car and they race over to that store. They meet the owner and they ask the owner about Daniel and if he knows who he is. And the store owner says, yeah, he's going to be here in the morning to pick up a check. I had hired the guy to paint some signs for me. So the cops stay the night in the hotel nearby. They get there bright and early. Sure than shit, Daniel comes walking in for his paycheck the next day, and the cops are waiting for him, and they slap some new bracelets on him. They throw his ass in the car, and they race him back to Talladega, and they sit him down, and they're like, all right, this is what we've got. And they lay out all the evidence, and they say, walk us through this. Now, what happened? So now, I'm just warning you and anybody else, I'm going to get into the details of what actually happened, what he did, and why he did it. So this is some sick shit. February 19th, 1986, Donald Hendren packs up the rest of his shit. He leaves Daniel's apartment. Daniel goes over, has lunch with Steve Laney and Linda Odom. Linda Odom is Steve's girlfriend. They're in the same apartment complex as Daniel. Steve has to leave that lunch early, so he takes off to go pick up his car or his truck. Linda is sitting back with Daniel, and they're discussing whatever they're discussing. It got heated, and Daniel ends up killing Linda Odom. What he does is he wraps her up because he's in their apartment, and he takes her and he stores her in his apartment. So he's got her wrapped up in a bed sheet, brings her over to his apartment. He leaves his apartment, and he goes over to Sherri Weathers' house, to her apartment in Sunrise Apartments. Linda Jarman's with him. They go out, buy beer, come back, play cards. They run out of beer. Daniel borrows Linda Jarman's car to go get some beer. But he doesn't buy beer. He goes home. He lowers Linda Odom's body down from his apartment to the street, grabs her body, throws it in the trunk, drives to a cemetery just outside of Talladega County, digs a shallow grave, buries Linda Odom's body, runs back, grabs some beer, runs back to Sherri's apartment. By this time, it's late. Linda Jarman takes her car, goes home. Sherri's pissed. They get in an argument. Daniel goes and he strangles and he chokes and kills her. He lays her in the hallway. And then one by one, he goes in and he wakes her kids up, takes them to, shows their mother to them so they can see that she's dead. Then he chokes and strangles each kid and lays them in the form of a cross on top of their mother in the hallway. What a sick son of a bitch, man.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
No.
So
it's fucked up.
He does that. It is really fucked up. So he leaves Sherri's house and he goes over to Linda Jarman's. He needs transportation. She lets him in. They sit up talking for a little bit. She goes to bed. He goes into her room while she's sleeping, grabs her sock that's on the floor, and chokes her and strangles her to death so he can steal her money, her VCR, and her car. And so he takes her car, her VCR, strangles her, and he takes off, and that's when he heads to Kentucky. So the cops go, why the hell would you murder Sherri Ann Weathers and her two sons? And he said, well, Sherri was deaf, and she wasn't going to go anywhere in life because she was deaf and wasn't going to amount to anything. So I killed her, and, well, her kids didn't, they didn't have much of a chance now that their mother was dead, so I just killed them too. I mean, holy shit, man. How could you just be that?
It's a sociopath, man. Jesus.
Dude. What a fucking nightmare of a human being.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, I mean, he ends up killing right there. So you have Linda Jarman, he killed. Linda Odom, he killed. There's two. And then you have Sherri, Chad, and Joey. So there's the five that he had murdered in that 24-hour period. Now, these five are the only ones he actually gets tried on. They eventually do tie him to the Beatrice McDougal murder that he committed in Atlantic City. And it turns out, remember that map I told you they found in his apartment when they went over there and did the investigation?
X's and O's.
They asked him about. Yeah. So they said, what does this mean? And he said, the X's are somewhere where I went and I committed a robbery. Anything where there's an X with a circle means I killed somebody there. So the police then started contacting all the counties where the X with the circle is, matched up the dates and so on and so forth. And they were able to string together about 13 individuals that were murdered in those areas, plus, what they had admitted to, which was included in that. So 13 minus 5, you're looking at another 8. And so during that time, they were only able to really tie him to 10 of the 13, but he only ended up going on trial for 5 of them. And that was Sherri, Joey, Chad, Linda, and Linda. Now, he ended up getting 2 completely separate death sentences for those murders. So should one of them slip through a crack or whatever, not actually end up serving it for whatever reason, there was another one to back it up. But it turned out, he never even ended up making that his full sentence because he actually got cancer while he was in jail. And even though he didn't serve, you know what I mean? Even though justice wasn't served, it was served. I mean, this prick's no longer walking this earth or able to hurt or harm anybody ever again.
Yeah. Adios.
But,
con Dios.
Man, really, I mean, what a sick son of a bitch.
Yeah, man.
But you know, you do these shows like we're doing here, and I'm doing the research. And the one thing I've learned, man, there is no shortage of serial killers out there or depraved people that have done shit in the past. I mean, humans just never cease to amaze me.
No, they really don't. You know, and you know, this obviously this platform's for entertainment purposes, and be able to kind of go in and look into the minds of these sociopaths or psychopaths, and we don't find any fun or any pleasure in you know in the demise of all these people at the hands of these horrible other people. But if nothing else, to pay homage to those that did suffer under these people, and really just spotlight how sadistic and sick some people are out there. Really wants you to really pushes you to pay attention to the people around you. You know what I'm saying?
Really does.
Yeah,
It's. I remember when my kids were younger, and my, you know, was trying to tell my kids and explain that the monster that's under the bed is not the monster you have to fear. It's the one that lives down the street from you that looks like the nicest guy or girl in the world, and turns out to be a friggin' serial killer.
There you go.
So we actually had a neighbor. My wife's mother had a neighbor that we went to go visit her one day, and there were police all over the yard, like 2 doors down from where she lived. And it turned out the husband had murdered the wife that morning. Wow. The story was that she had a disorder, like she was OCD, always liked to wash her hands. And she was washing her hands, I guess, one too many times for his liking, and
he snapped.
Put a stop to it, I guess. Yeah. And so, unfortunate, but it's just weird. Like, I'd seen that neighbor before, never would have guessed that, you know? Yeah. But, so everybody keep your friggin' eyes out. Not saying don't trust anybody, but don't trust everybody.
Don't. Yeah, but kind of don't. So you told me about you told us all about his artwork. You're gonna put a link in here, right? I went in and I looked at some of that other stuff, and it's wicked how, like, I hate to say the word talented he was, because he was really gifted with, you know, the ability to you know, sketch art and whatnot. But what he sketches and the things that he draws is very concerning, and probably should have set off flags for somebody. So make sure you put that link in there so people who do want to check it out can go in there and look and browse.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I'll put a link in the description, and I actually, as they've probably seen already, I've already had pictures up while we were talking about this.
Yeah, sure.
Those are only 2 of his collection that I can show. I mean, the rest, once again,
we want to keep our show going on YouTube, so we don't want to get you know, nixed for putting too much out there. So
yeah, and if you're under the age of 18, just ask your parents before you just go viewing. You probably shouldn't be looking at that stuff. But if you did like what you saw tonight, please give us a like. Maybe click that subscribe button. It surely helps us out with the algorithm and helps us to create more of this fun content for you, and educational. It's supposed to be educational as well. But thanks for watching till the end, and we'll see you next time on the Shadowlands.
See you guys.